Hey guys, welcome to the second webinar of today. So today is Friday, actually Black Friday. So make sure you guys check it out, our Black Friday deals to become a premium member. And by the way, I'm Juliana Moraes. I'm the premium community leader at VanHack. So some of you might know me already. And if you do become a premium, I'll be your to-go person. So that's very exciting. So today's webinar is a very hot topic. It's all about acing the coding interview. So, and we do have a special speaker today, Tam Kbeili. So, hi, Tam. Thank you so much for being here. We're just gonna wait a couple more minutes, wait until people get into the room. So let me see. So hey everyone. There are people from India, Turkey, Nigeria, Colombia, Pakistan. Lovely guys. Nice to meet you. I hope you guys enjoy. Happy Friday. Cool. So, okay, so I just want to introduce a little bit Tam Kbeili. So he's the founder and CEO of CodeCast. So he's probably going to talk a little bit more about this. But CodeCast is a platform where you can stream and share code in real time. So if you guys are a developer, you guys should check it out. He's also a co-founder and the lead instructor of CodeCore Bootcamp. So it's a very popular school here in Vancouver, Canada. I'm an alumni student there. So I met him back in about a year or so ago. And he's an incredible professional developer, entrepreneur, and a professor. So I hope you guys enjoy. So let's just make sure you guys can hear us well. So let me know if you guys see our screen and if you guys can hear us.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Just want to make sure everybody can hear me here.
Awesome. So yeah, so we're going to have about 30-minute session, then we're going to open up for questions. So this is a very hot topic, guys. So please contribute with your questions. So I'll be here writing down the questions. So we'll try our best to answer all the questions today. So awesome, Luis. Thank you for letting us know. Okay. So I think, yes, everyone can hear us. And I got a couple questions here. So please write it down in the chat for me. So I guess you guys might be a developer, right? So let me know how many years of experience you guys have with coding. So write it down in the chat for me. Five years, 10 years, 15 years, 23 years, 2 years.
Wow.
Awesome.
So many experienced developers. That's awesome.
I know. A lot of talented developers here. 6 years, 9 years. Cool. I love that. Perfect. And one more question here. So how prepared do you feel for a coding interview? If you were to have a coding interview tomorrow, how prepared do you feel? Let us know here on the chat as well. Do you feel really prepared? Not prepared at all? If you need more preparation? 90% prepared. Cool. 80%, 60%. Amazing, amazing. So that's nice that there are a lot of people also that feel prepared for that. So amazing. But I feel like when it comes to an interview and preparation, so there's always a room for improvements, right? So we're gonna talk more about this. I'm very excited. So Tam, I'm gonna pass the mic to you. So I'll be here. So if you guys have any questions as well, so we're gonna be here. So it's all yours now.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Juliana, for the really nice introduction. Hello, everyone. Like Juliana said, my name is Tam. I'm the founder and the CEO of a platform called CodeCast. Love you to check it out. It's basically a streaming platform for developer education. We're running different workshops on it, including the one at the summit tomorrow for the Rails deep dive. I'm Tammam, my full name Tamam, on Twitter. Love to also chat with you on Twitter. So before I did CodeCast, I was the founder and lead instructor at the Code Core Developer Bootcamp. And during my experience there for about 5 to 6 years, I've helped hundreds of students go through technical interviews. So what I'm going to explain to you today would be basically all the tidbits and principles that I've learned from helping so many students that I'm going to distill to you in this 30-minute presentation that I hope is going to help you in your technical interview. So first of all, let's talk generally what the interview process looks like when you're applying for a technical job. Generally, it looks something like this. You apply for a job, and then you do a coding interview, and then you do a behavioral interview, and then if all goes well, you get the job. Of course, this process may differ a bit depending on the company. Some companies do a phone call before the coding interview. Some people do semi-behavioral interview before the coding one. Some people do reference check after the behavioral interview and so on. But roughly, these are the three major components that you're going to see in any technical interview. So I'm going to focus mostly today on the coding part, mainly because the other part, I think VanHack can help you tremendously with it. So I'm going to leave it to Juliana and her team to help you with the other parts. But I'm going to focus primarily on the coding one, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the other two pieces as well. So starting with the apply, as I mentioned, VanHack will help you tremendously with this. They have a job board. They tell you how to present yourself. So I'll leave it mostly to them to help you with that. I'm just going to mention one thing on the topic of applying. My one advice that I would give you is apply to as many jobs as you can. Although many of you will ideally get into a particular company or a particular type of position, in many cases what happens is, like this guy says, I don't always find a perfect job, but when I do, it's already been filled. That happens a lot. So in many cases, your perfect job may be filled. The company may not be hiring at that moment. So I would say just, spread the net wide and apply to as many jobs as possible. That's the one advice I would give you. Beside that, again, I would leave you to utilize the resources at VanHack to apply for jobs. So my focus today will be primarily on the coding interview part. Me being a developer, my background and helping many developer students, I can probably give you some good tips here that will help you do better in the coding interview. So first of all, let's talk about the different types, the common types of coding interviews. There is first the whiteboard interview. You've probably heard of that one. It doesn't have to necessarily be on a whiteboard. It could be on a Google Doc. It could be in a remote peering software. But the idea of a whiteboard interview is that you're giving it like a coding challenge, a coding problem, and then you have to solve it step-by-step live in front of the interviewer. So the interviewer has to actually watch you as you're coding bit by bit. Google, for instance, when they interview their people, they have them do it on Google Docs, I heard. Some other companies do it on some remote software. And if you're in person, you actually do it on a whiteboard. So you actually write the code by hand. I'll be frank with you, it's not my favorite type of interview, but still many companies use it. So the fact that many companies use it, it's good to be prepared in case a company uses that type of interview for the coding. A second type of interview is the take-home exam. So This is actually kind of my preferred approach for interviewing. When I interview developers, I usually use this type of coding interview. So let's say you're applying for a React position, a React.js position. What ends up happening, the interviewer will ask you to take 1 or 2 days and write a mini app using React, for instance, maybe with a backend, maybe without. And then they will assess your code after the fact. And, you see if you've done well or not. Again, to me, this mostly mimics what you do in real life. I mean, a lot of the jobs these days are remote, but even if not, you're basically given a time to do a particular coding task. So I think this mimics mostly what really happens in the life of a developer. That said, not everybody uses that. That's why it's good to be prepared for different types of interviews. Third type of interview is pair with a developer. So it's similar to a whiteboard, but instead of like actually solving a technical challenge on a whiteboard, you actually code on a computer with a developer, and then through that interaction, that developer will assess your fit, your technical skills, and your fit within the team. Finally, building a mockup. This one is mostly common for front-end positions. Let's say you're applying for JavaScript, like say with HTML and CSS, they'll give you some mockups and they'll tell you to build them, and then they'll assess your code based on that. Of course, there are other types of interviews, but these are the most common types of interviews you're going to encounter when applying to jobs in Canada, US, or many other places. So I'm going to give you general principles. Those principles apply, I would say, regardless about the type of interview you're going to. I would say this is probably one of the key takeaways for you guys. If you understand those principles well, I think you'll do well in most types of coding interviews. First principle is that treat interviewing as a skill that needs to be mastered. The same way you learn how to be good at React, be good at front end, be good at writing a cover letter, you should treat interviewing like a skill. It's not just a thing you have to do to get the job. If you really want to get a job, and honestly, if you really want to excel in this industry by basically, getting to good company after another company, I would highly encourage you to treat an interview like a skill that needs to be mastered, and it can be mastered. The same way you learned, to code, whether you learn in Java or PHP or whatever, you can learn how to interview. So treat it like a skill. And a skill is something that you need to learn some of the things about, and then you also have to practice. So skill is something you have to practice. So again, here, keep this principle in mind. So treat it like a skill. It needs to be practiced. It needs to be mastered. And this is all types of interviews, the coding and the behavioral, but especially the coding. So again, here, make sure you set time aside to practice and master this as a skill. So generally speaking, these are the kind of things you would need to land a job. So first, you need the technical chops. By the way, anything I teach you today, it doesn't make sense unless you have the technical abilities. So having the technical abilities is a must, of course, but it's not enough. Sometimes you may have slightly more technical abilities than another developer, but that other developer lands a job and you don't. Why? Because the other developer may have mastered those skills slightly better than you. So presenting yourself, basically what I mean by presenting yourself is being able to depict your skills and abilities on resumes, LinkedIn profiles, Angel List, whatever you're applying. And again, through VanHack. So again, this is something that probably VanHack can help you most with. Job hunting skills. How do you find a job? How do you write a cover letter? How do you do research about the company? And then finally, interviewing skills. Okay. So again, if you want to land your dream jobs, I would encourage you to master this full stack job hunting. Again, there's no substitution for having good technical chops, but make sure you set some time aside to doing these. And I have noticed, during my experience at CodeCast, the people who land jobs quickly or who land the best jobs weren't necessarily the most technically able people. They were people who were more well-rounded with all these skills. So again, here, treat interviewing like a skill and practice it very well. Principle 2, treat an interview as a conversation and not a test. I know this may not come naturally because we're all conditioned from the time of schools. of having tests. So you take a course. At the end of the course, you have an exam or a quiz, and then that's a test for how well you did in that. So we always think of interviews like a test. I mean, it is a test in a little bit, but actually it's a lot more like a conversation. The people in the interview, they want to find reasons to hire you because they need somebody to join their team and help them build the code. That said, they want the right person. Okay, so don't treat it like you just answer questions. Treat it like a conversation. And as you will see, I would encourage you to ask questions, inquire, make it like a two-way thing, not just somebody asking questions and somebody's answering. Inquire more, ask more, be curious about the company, be curious about the tech stack, be curious about their coding process, coding standards, and so on. Treat it like a two-way thing. Starting from like even the coding interview, the whiteboard interview, which I will do an example of a little bit later. Yeah, this may not come naturally to you, but again, I want you to step out of your thinking that it's a test and think of it more of a conversation. Principle 3, know as much as possible about the company. Most companies, especially startups like small companies, care more about people who know a lot about them and who actually care about what they're doing, the mission of the company, the vision of the company, the values of the company, what the company mostly cares about or what they mostly want to know about. So this is why learn as much as possible about the company. This is especially important in the behavioral part of the interview. So when you're basically asking you the last bits of questions and where it's less technical. That said, even in the technical part of the interview, the more you know about the company, it will arm you with some things that you can basically have conversations about. It will show you're deeply interested in this particular company, their product, what they're doing. So again, here, research as much as possible about a company. I mean, you should have done some research when you applied, but they go much deeper into that when you actually get the interview. So the type of interview that basically again throws a lot of developers off is a whiteboard interview, and I'm not surprised. Again, it's basically, honestly, it started like way back when Microsoft started kind of doing this because they wanted to scale their interview process. So they standardized the questions, they standardized how, they interview people. And then many companies kind of followed suit on that. Again, here, it's not my preferred interview method. That said, there are many good companies that actually use whiteboard interviews. So don't, say this is a bad company because they use whiteboard interviews. On the contrary, I mean, I think there are some really good companies that do that. And it is basically a skill that needs to be mastered. And I think it's something that you could practice. So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to do a bit of a demo for how I would go about doing a whiteboard interview. I'm going to share my screen actually for this one. Let me see. Okay. I'm going to turn to the chat for a second. Are you guys able to see my screen?
I still see the slides PowerPoint.
You're not able to see my screen?
No, not yet. So maybe we can stop the slide presentation for a while.
1 second.
And try now.
Can you see it? Still no?
Not yet.
Let me give this a try here. Yeah, I click on it and then I select my entire screen. It doesn't seem to share it. Let me see if maybe I have to turn off my camera first.
Let's try that.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be working. Okay.
If I turn off the camera. Is it something that you could maybe upload? Is that like a PDF or something that you could?
No, I was actually I have my iPad, so I was gonna literally mimic how I'm gonna whiteboard an interview, but that's fine. I'll just go back to this one, and I'm gonna do my best to explain how I would do it.
Okay.
So let me try this. Oh, I lost my presentation now. Sorry.
No. Okay, so I can quickly upload that.
Sorry, I'm uploading this. Just give me 1 minute.
Yeah.
It'll be fine.
So guys, maybe it would be a good time for you guys to start writing down your questions on the chat. So there we go.
Okay, I'm skipping to the slides we were at. All right. So, oops. It went way too fast. Sorry.
No problem.
Okay. Awesome.
There we go.
So, yeah, let's say you get this question. I actually got this question in one of my early interviews when I was being interviewed as more like a junior to intermediate developer. Write a piece of code that find the most recurring letter in a string. So let's say you get this as a whiteboard type of interview question. So what would you do with that? Your first inclination is to start to write code, okay? What I would encourage you, and this is here where you should like step a little bit from the mentality of, just thinking of this as a test and thinking of it more of a conversation. I wish I could have, the thing to write on the board, but again, I'm going to try to mimic that as much as I can. So what you would do in the situations like this, I'd actually open up with a question. I would tell the interviewer, okay, that sounds good. I will write a code. Is it okay if I write it in Ruby, or would you like me to write it in some other language? Again, this will depend on the job. Some job asks for, say, like Ruby, JavaScript, Python knowledge, right? So when they're interviewing you, maybe ask, like, can I do it in Ruby? So that's, again, it's a simple question. Again, it's turning the interview more into a conversation, which I think is extremely important. And then you could ask, would you like me to take input from the user? Or would you like me to basically just have a fixed string, and then that string should find the most recurring letter in that particular string? And then the interviewer will ask you, be like, you know what, take an input from the user. So you start by writing that simple code that takes input from the user. So if you're familiar with Ruby, it simply gets.chomp. Now the next part here, and this is a very important tip I want to give you, when you're in a whiteboard interview, always think out loud. So what do you mean? Even though something may be obvious, still speak to what you're doing. You can say, okay, I used get. Get is a method in Ruby that takes input from the user. It basically stops the program until the user types something and hits enter. Okay, I'm going to use chomp here. Why I'm using chomp? Because if I don't use chomp, when the user hits enter, it's going to capture that enter key as well. So notice here, although the interviewer knows, the fact that you're verbalizing your thinking process, first of all, it's giving you more time to think about the problem. It's also telling the interviewer what you know. So it's telling the interviewer that, yeah, like you're using this for this purpose or that reason, and so on. Then you can move to the next step. Okay, so I have a string, and then again here, I'm thinking out loud. I'm intentionally verbalizing my thinking process. I can say something like, a string is really just a series of characters. It's kind of like an array of characters. So, I'm thinking here, maybe I could turn the string into an array. So that's one way to do it. Or I could iterate through the characters in the string line one by one, and then do something with it. So notice here, again here, I'm working through solutions. And sometimes that's very valuable because it shows the interviewer what you know and that you're thinking of different solutions. And then you can say, I'm going to pick just iterating through every character because I don't think we need to necessarily go to the step of converting it to an array. That could be a little bit costly. By the way, interviewer, do you care more about performance or more about elegance of the code? Right. So, and again, that could be an important general question that almost applies to every interview. Some companies, especially large ones, care mostly about performance. Usually mid to small size companies care more about having more readable, more elegant code, right? But it's good to ask the interviewer that question and don't make an assumption on that one. And then you move on to the next step. You'd be like, okay, so what I need to do to know the most recurring letter in a string, what I need to do, I need to store maybe the frequency of each letter somehow. So I'm thinking here, maybe I could put it in an array. So if I put it in an array, I have to somehow know the position of every letter. Again, you're thinking out loud. It sounds boring in some ways. It sounds like that it's like not needed, but it's actually, this is again part of how you turn the interview into a conversation. At any point, the interviewer may jump in and may give you some tip or may like push you forward. So it'd be like, okay, I think I'm going to use a hash, which is a key value store if you're not familiar with Ruby, because I can have the key as a letter, and I can have the value as the frequency of that letter, starting with 0. And then every time I encounter the letter again, I can increment that frequency by 1. And then at the very end, I can basically go through that hash and then see which one is the most recurring, and then I'll print it out. So I'll write another loop to go through it afterward. So again, here you're verbalizing your thinking process. And then let's say you get stuck at somewhere, like you get stuck at some point and you're unsure how to basically loop through every character. What I would recommend you do in that situation, I would recommend that you basically come up with something like ask a question in a way to be like, I'm sure you can say something like, I believe that there is a method in Ruby, or let's say JavaScript, whatever language you're using, to basically iterate through every letter. I don't exactly remember it, but I'm going to assume it's every character or something like this, right? So you write each character or every character, right? Although the actual method name is each char. It's actually less important there because the interviewer is mostly looking for your thinking process. He knows you could Google this in real life. So again, here he wants to know, or she wants to know, your thinking process on that. So again, here, verbalize what you're saying, what you're doing, explain every step. And if you're stuck, if you're really, really stuck, then you could even say something like, hey, you know what? I'm stuck right here. On a job, I would probably Google something like, how do you, let's say, find the most how do you iterate through a hash, as an example, right? I would Google something like that. Would you be able to tell me that? And maybe that will help me go forward, right? Again, here, when you treat this like a conversation, you really increase your odds of landing the job interview. So again, here, I wish I could have done it on a board and write the code line by line, but I'm just going to skip that step for now because the screen share is not working. One pro tip also I will give you, this is again one of those things that may not be very intuitive to you, and I know actually many students who landed a job because of this, is follow up with better solutions. Let's say you solved it in a way, and then you go discover some solution at home when you are doing it by yourself, or even if, like, let's say a take-home interview, you do it and you submit it, and there's you discover a better way to do it. Although the time limit is finished, the interview is finished, always follow up with better solutions. Say, hey, like when I got home, I was still thinking about the problem, and then I came up with this better solution, and here it is. I really worked on it. I know the interview is finished, but I just said I would mention that to you. Believe me, that goes a long way. And I know even many really like friends, senior developers, sometimes they get stressed during interviews, and you can say something like, hey, I was really stressed. I overlooked something like, having this solution instead of the one I showed you. So please consider this solution here also that I'm sending you here. It shows the interviewer that you're continuously thinking about the problem, and that's usually a good sign of a good developer. So again, here, if you come home and you think it can be done better, always follow up, send a thank you note, say thank you for your time during the interview. Hey, like I found these solutions, a better solutions for the problems you gave me. Here they are, and hope to hear back from you. Something like this. As I mentioned earlier, if you don't have the right technical skills, no trick is gonna basically help you. Like you know, those things I'm showing you here, assuming you have base technical knowledge, then it will help you, get through that hurdle that's the interview, especially that it can be stressful, it can be unnatural for many developers. These are two websites I recommend if you want to practice type of whiteboard question interviews. Visit these two sites, codewars.com and hackerrank.com. Maybe I'll give this interview later to Juliana to share with you guys. I don't know if, or it could be shareable through this webinar jam, so you could download it if you don't want to take notes at the moment. But again, here, can't emphasize enough, just practice, practice, practice. Don't just practice doing the exercises. Usually when you work on Code Wars or HackerRank, you do it in the browser. So, which is easier, by the way, because the browser, when you make a typo, it shows you the typo there. You have a nice editor in the browser and stuff. The disadvantage of a whiteboard interview is that you do not have access to syntax highlighting. You do not have access to, something to give you clues that you're doing something right or wrong. So this is why I would say practice those questions, and also practice doing some of those on a whiteboard. So a good way we found a lot of students do it is that you take turns. So you make groups of a few developer friends that want to practice for interviews. Each one does the interview and the others can play the interviewer. I found that works out really well. I want to give you a few tips about take-home tests. Again, this is my preferred way to remind you what this one is. Let's say you're applying for a Ruby on Rails position. I will tell you, build this mini app. You have 3 days to a week to do it. And then you build this mini app that shows me at least you have some core concepts of Rails covered. So when I hire you, I know at least you have those things covered. And in my opinion, this mimics real life programming. This is why I like this type of test a lot more than I like the whiteboard. So hopefully you land in a company that does this for you. That said, it's not it's not always the case. That's why it's good to practice all types of tests. So what things you can keep in mind for take-home tests? Also ask questions. You may be surprised. I'll repeat my same thing here. So before you start, clarify certain things. Say, hey, I'm going to use this framework for CSS. Is that okay? Or do you prefer that I use something else? Maybe the CSS framework they mentioned isn't, so they didn't mention a particular CSS framework. They might tell you, hey, you know what? Don't worry about framework for CSS. Just write plain CSS. Or they might say, well, we use Bootstrap or Foundation in our organization, so maybe you should, pick one of those, something like that. So again, here, don't treat it just like as you receive the test, you have to start doing it right away. Ask questions, inquire. If you get the chance to talk on the phone, it's even better to just clarify some things that may not be clear. Most tests I found they can do some more clarification, especially, depending on your situation. So don't be shy to ask questions for take-home tests. The other thing I would recommend to you is write tests. What I mean by write tests, write unit tests or integration tests. Only if needed, write comments. I've noticed that, if you write the code in a good way, the code speaks for itself. So you don't actually need to write comments. Now, in some cases, the code can be a bit complicated that needs some comment to explain what the code is doing. This is why, again, comments, in my opinion, it's probably less important if you write good code. But even if they didn't ask you to write unit tests and integration tests, I think it's a great thing to have in your application, because most companies, when they get to a certain size, let's say 10 plus employees or something, tests become extremely important. You don't have to necessarily do it like hardcore test-driven development type of thing, but it has like 100% coverage and things like that. Just be pragmatic about it and write some tests to cover the base cases, maybe the success case and the failure case for the type of code that you're writing. So again, here, I think it will speak very well to you and to your coding abilities if you write tests, even if they did not ask you to write tests as part of the take-home interview. Finally, the culture fit. Usually this is usually done in person. At least if you're in the country. Like, let's say if you're in Canada, usually the team will take you out for coffee or lunch and see the culture fit that you have for that company. For you guys, I don't know, like some of you may do it remotely and whatnot, but in any case, it's usually done sometimes by the founder of the company if it's, say, less than 50 employees, if it's done by HR, engineering manager, or VP of engineering, if if that's if it's a bigger company and the CEO is extremely busy to look at every hire. Again, this is something that probably VanHack can give you a lot of help and support with. I did notice, especially to their, I think, premium tiers, they have some interview help and whatnot. So what I'll do, I will give you a few tips about that, again, to complement what VanHack can offer you. Research the company as much as possible. Again, here it's one of my core principles that I gave you earlier. Just again, how do you research a company? How do you research a company? Well, here are a few things you could start with. Of course, start by the company's website. If you're able to try the product, make sure you try the product. Sometimes it's not. Basically, it's an enterprise product, and you need like a demo and a salesperson. It may be a little bit much to actually try the product for a really like for certain types of companies. But let's say you're applying to Shopify. Shopify is a very popular, well-known Canadian company. So I would start with their website. So what is Shopify is all about? Well, it helps you create stores. Are you able to create stores? Yes, they have a free way to create stores. So start there. Learn more about them, and then create a store yourself and try different plugins. Go as far as you can by trying the product. Giving you this product gives you some, again, context to ask questions, to have conversations with the team members, and to know more about the company, which shows extremely well, especially in the behavioral part of the interview. A blog. Every company has a blog usually, or sometimes multiple blogs. So go ahead and read recent articles and see, technical and non-technical. I would make a mix of both. If there are some technical articles about their architecture, languages they're using, how they run their teams, do they use Agile or not, what's their experience with this methodology or that, like go and learn as much as possible about the company. Unfortunately, every company is different. There aren't common things, but just go and, I'd say, spend as much as possible reading about the blog. Social media as well. Many companies use Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, etc. So go check their social media. There are usually links on the website to those social media accounts. So check them out, see what they're talking about, what they're tweeting about. Again, make a good mix of technical and non-technical type of posts. Glassdoor, if you're not familiar with the Glassdoor, it's a website that basically rates different companies, and it's basically previous employees writing about that particular company. I found it a really good way to kind of like look through what some company practices are, how the company is doing, how do they like to treat their employees, what kind of activities they do, and things like that. Also a great resource for you to do it. Also Google the company. So write things like, let's say Shopify, you could do something like write Shopify news, or, Shopify in the press, or just write Shopify and see what comes up in Google. And that could be some interesting things that come from there. And finally, previous employees. Many people, especially in Canada, are fairly approachable. So if you reach somebody on LinkedIn and say, "Hey, I'm planning to apply for Shopify. I notice you're an employee or you're a previous employee. Would you mind giving me a few tips for, how to best apply, how to best learn about the company, and so on?" And you'd be surprised that, more often than not, people are quite helpful, and they will actually give you some tips and some things, pros and cons for different companies and what to watch for. So another good resource to research a company. So spend quite a bit of time, and I would say do this before the coding interview, even though it's mostly helpful for the behavioral, before the coding interview, because again, it could give you some context to chat with the technical team as well. My rule of thumb is that be prepared with at least 10 questions, because many of them will be pre-answered during the conversation. Some companies start your conversation, technical or non-technical, by telling you something like, again, to use the Shopify example, we're Shopify, we're a place to help people build online stores and blah, blah. And then they start to tell you a bunch of things about the company that could let's say you have only 2 questions, maybe during this initial intro to the company or initial conversation, those questions will be pre-answered. So this is why I would recommend have at least 10. And if you've researched their blog, Twitter, social media, website, tried their product, I think you can easily come up with 10. If you can come up with more, it's even better. And again, if you have questions and you ask questions during the coding or the behavioral part, it shows you're interested in the company. You make the company feel that you care about working with them, not just for technology or because you just need a job, but because you care about what they do as a company and because you care about their mission, their vision, their values. And, even for the technical team, that's a huge plus because people don't just want others who can churn code and that's it. They want people who can be aligned with them because in the long term, that's better for everybody. And again, send a thank you follow up. It's a very simple email. Usually, you should have gotten their email from a business card or from a sheet or something. If you don't, try to get it somehow and send them a thank you note. Say something. As I mentioned earlier, if it's a coding interview, you want to send a better solution. That would be a good way to combine both a thank you and here's a better solution for the question you asked me. For the behavioral part, especially if the CEO that may or may not be technical, you could say something like, hey, thank you for taking the time. I'm super excited about the opportunity. I really like what you guys are doing. And maybe mention something that came through the conversation. It's like, yeah, I'm super excited to possibly be part of the project XYZ that we talked about because I think it's going to make a huge impact to the customers and so on. So again, here it shows deep interest in the company and what they're doing, and it goes beyond just, the technical aspect of things. All right, that basically concludes my presentation for today. We're going to take questions later if you have any. The pitch here is that I will be doing a free Rails workshop tomorrow as part of the summit. So check out codecast.io or check out the summit website. And then I'll be doing a full workshop. This is ideal for the one. I've noticed many of you have 2+ years of experience. So if you've done something like, say, PHP or .NET or some other types of framework, and you want just a quick way to learn about Ruby on Rails, tomorrow would be a good way to do it. It's called Rails Deep Dive. I will be the teacher in it. I will basically walk you through building a Rails app with step by step. It will go a little fast. This is why I assume you know at least something about web development. But I think it's going to be good. Many companies still hire for Rails in Vancouver and elsewhere. It's also a good way to get another framework, to be familiar with another framework. Again, my name is Tam. Check out codecast.io. Feel free to email me, tam@codecast.io. Would love to hear from you. Any feedback on this presentation or on Codecast or anything. Also on Twitter, TAMMAM. This M is going to the next line for some reason, but that's my Twitter handle. Also would love to hear from you on Twitter. Thank you all for attending. We'll take questions. So I'll hand it over to Juliana. Do you want to talk about this one first, or do you want to talk about take questions first?
I think we can go through the questions first.
Sure.
And then then we can go to the other slide. So guys, time to make questions. So please write down your questions on the chat. So I think we can still start taking some of the questions here. And so first of all, thank you so much, Tam. I think was like a lot of great pro tips that you gave to us today. Then and then I feel that one of the most fear of the candidates is it's not being able to answer a question, let's say, during a whiteboarding question, right? Even Christian was asking this on the chat today. So I know you talked a little bit about this, but could you maybe elaborate a little bit more, or like how can you handle that, like not being able to answer a question during a whiteboarding interview?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and yeah, like it actually happened to me personally. Like 7 years ago, I was interviewing at Groupon. You guys know Groupon, like the deals website. It's quite popular in North America. I'm not sure if it's popular in I see people from India, Brazil, Pakistan, etc. So I was interviewing there, and I actually did not arrive to the full functional solution. I just got very close, but also my solution has been, close enough. And then the interviewer himself just said, okay, you know what, that's good enough. Let's move on to the next question, right? And then here, again, what I would do, I would be like, if even if the interviewer didn't initiate that, I would go as far as saying, you know what, this is as far as I can go for now without having access to Google or having access to my editor. I would love to, send you a better answer later. And this is where you could follow up with a better answer. And then, with your thank you note or with your thank you email, you could say, hey, I went home and I just worked on it right away, and this is a better solution I came up with, right? It's just, again, here, you're trying to show, and if you've verbalized your thinking process through it, at least you've shown the interviewer how much problem solving skills, how much you care about the company, what's your thinking abilities, what's your attitude, and that goes a long way. I mean, again, it's a little bit non-intuitive for people who are like interviewing, mainly because we're coming from like a school where you write a test and it's like either correct or wrong, and then you either get the mark or you don't, right? So interview is very different. People want people who can think critically, who can think analytically, who can get close enough to the answer, because everybody knows if you're given a computer, you're probably going to come to the answer.
Yes, totally. I totally agree, because it can be very stressful, right? Like it's easy to go blank, right, during an interview. But I think it's all about being honest and try to keep calm and ask questions, try to clarify, I love that tip of like thinking out loud. I think it's very important process to show the interviewer your lines of thought, right? So amazing, great. So Sibel is asking, so what about if she's like doing the take-home test and everything is going well, and then suddenly you get stuck in the middle of it? So it would be okay to clarify questions in the middle of the test, or how does that work?
100%. It would be good to clarify if you get like absolutely stuck and you can't move from there. I would, like send an email to the interviewer and say, hey, like, of course, I mean, you should be sharing your code somehow. Like maybe I'd recommend GitHub, but any kind of Git repo is usually good. Or even if you want to use Subversion or some other code source control. So say, hey, like, this is what I've gotten so far. I've stuck to this point. I'm thinking, and this is where you could also verbalize your thinking process. I'm thinking I could approach it this way or that way or this way. I would love your input on it. Or you can simply say, I'm completely stuck here. Would you just give me a little bit of tip to move forward, right? In real life, like, for example, we have a junior developer in our team now. The junior developer asks a lot of questions, and that's okay. We help him, and then that will push him to the next level, and then he can move a little bit forward and so on. So it is okay, again, especially if you're kind of in that intermediate level. So, or that could be sometimes, the key thing that, could be extremely tricky about the problem, and they could give you a little hint or a little tip or something like that, right? That said, I would try to limit that. Like, I wouldn't ask every little thing to them, right? Like, try to limit this to one or two, key, like, things you're stuck on in the whole thing, and try to muscle through the rest by yourself. And by the way, at the end of it, they do ask you to explain your solution usually, or like walk through why did you do this here and there. So I would highly discourage you. This is why I discourage you from getting help from others, because again, it could make you look bad if you try to explain your solution later, and then somebody helped you with the solution and like you didn't. So yeah.
Good. Amazing. So another thing that I get a lot these days, I see like on job descriptions a lot, like people asking clean code skills. So how would you show your clean code?
That's a very good question. A clean code could be, it's one of those things that's, I'd say more art than science when it comes to writing code. I would say here, should be a lifelong process for you to write what could be specified as clean code. I would, because again, what could mean clean code to some person could mean different thing to another person, especially if you're coming from like an object-oriented background or functional programming background, or depends on the type of job you're applying to. There are some really good books. An author I really like, his name is Martin Fowler. He has a number of good books. I think one of them is actually called Clean Code, literally called Clean Code. And it's a great book, but all of his books are amazing. His articles are great. So following some of his principles, regardless of the programming language of choice, I think would be great. Learning any refactoring tips and refactoring techniques. There are many books on refactoring is also a good way to do clean code. Of course, I mean, I'm not mentioning the obvious things, but indentation, for example, that's like a clear thing there. Naming variables properly is a clear thing there. So there's some baseline things that I think most developers are familiar with, but there's actually taking it to the next level. This is why I said it could mean different things to different people. And this is where you could learn it from, like reading articles by, good thought leaders in the industry, like Martin Fowler, for instance. So it's, again, and honestly, like, even I have a lot for me to learn about clean code, and for senior developers, it's a lifelong learning process. So I think regardless, just for interview sake, just, take it as a habit to learn good refactoring techniques, good writing clean code techniques. I think it's going to be great for your career.
That's true.
Also, I noticed some people are asking for, like, while we're on the topic of books and stuff, some people are asking about, like, books for learning algorithms.
Yes.
Some whiteboard interviews ask you to write algorithms, something I didn't mention, like, sorting algorithms, searching algorithms, and stuff like that. The book that I found most helpful is one called Cracking the Coding Interview.
This is a very popular one.
Yeah, Cracking the Coding Interview is great. It covers so many bases. Although I would say it's more suited for bigger companies. Like, it is suited for, say, you're applying for, Amazon, Google, those bigger type of companies. That said, it's great practice regardless. So I would study in that book if you want to. That said, even doing a lot of code wars and doing a lot of hacker rank type of exercises is also good, because these websites actually allow you to look at solutions. So you could write a solution, see if it works, and then look at other people's solutions. So by doing that thing, you could actually improve your technical abilities, your algorithmic thinking, and so on.
Amazing. Yes. So Javier is asking if is there a more frequent format of technical interviews in Vancouver and Toronto?
Frequent format in Toronto. I've noticed more companies are trending toward take-home tests. That said, there are still some that are doing whiteboard interviews. I know many of my students still go through whiteboard interviews, and some people do a mix, by the way. Some people start you with a whiteboard interview, and then they give you a take-home exam after this to do it. So I would say take-home is probably the most popular in Vancouver and Toronto. That said, some are still doing type of whiteboard interviews.
I see. And so Mauricio mentioned something about GitHub, and then how important is to have GitHub or any other, or a personal website nowadays to show that you can.
You can do it. Yeah. Sorry, I'm going to go back to a previous slide here.
Mm-hmm.
Remember when I focused today mostly on the coding interview part of things.
Mm-hmm.
But if you noticed here, I encouraged everybody to be a full stack job hunter by focusing on technical skills. Now, the next thing I mentioned here is presenting yourself. Presenting yourself is LinkedIn. It's like Angel List profile. It's your like resume, but also it's GitHub as well. GitHub is a way to present yourself as a developer. So I'd say it's extremely important. My tips for you on GitHub is to, GitHub allows you to have, even free private repos now. So what you could do, I encourage you to make everything private, except for a few projects that you would like to kind of highlight. Some things you're proud about. Some things you've applied, solid principles or best practices or clean code. And then you want to showcase those, keep them the ones that are publicly available. Many of you will probably do things like, oh, this is like, I'm taking a course on React and this is a little exercise. So I would make those private. It still doesn't affect that green coding grid that you have, even if you make things private. But you don't want to show people just exercises on React. That's not very interesting to potential employers of yours. But if you have a nice project, and more importantly, honestly, if you've contributed to open source in any way, that's a great plus for you, especially if you contributed to a well-known thing. Like you could, an open source could be just your side project you made open source. If it's complete, if it's good, that's great. And if you've contributed to a well-known library, well-known package, or a well-known framework, it's in my opinion, it's even better because the interviewer will be familiar with it, will know about it, and then I think that will be a plus points for you.
Definitely, I totally agree with that. So, as a developer, I always advise people to be able to build strong cases, right? And part of this is really like showing your skills, being able to show your skills somehow, and talk about your projects, and show maybe a portfolio, show your projects on GitHub or any other open source. So yeah, that's definitely important, guys. So we're coming to the end. So I want to thank you, Tam, so much for your insights. I want to thank everyone here that joined our webinar. So we're going to make this webinar available for the next 24 hours. So I hope you guys have enjoyed. And I think when it comes to job interview or coding interview, preparation is the key, guys. And VanHack, we have the premium VanHack, which is our educational platform, and we have a bunch of services that can help you prepare for your job interview and be a more successful candidate. Okay, so make sure you guys check it out, our Black Friday deals. Okay, and so there's still a lot of more things to come. So tomorrow we have Tam again doing our another webinar on Ruby on Rails. So make sure you guys check it out. So I think that's it. Thank you so much, Tam. Thank you so much, guys.
For having me, guys. Wish you the best of luck, and hopefully we'll cross paths with some of you as developers in Canada or elsewhere later.
All right. Bye. See you guys later.
Care. Bye.
Take care.